by themselves, the container will pass stuff into them. So it'll say, hey, this page that you're on is showing record X or record Y. So you get a little bit more information. Some really cool features here about notifications. How many people have rebuilt these things in the past? Message boxes and pop-up notifications. You don't need to do that anymore. There is APIs that do that, and they look just like the regular Salesforce ones. In fact, they are the regular Salesforce ones. Salesforce has completely turned around the way that it delivers APIs to developers these days, and what they use is what we use and vice versa, to varying degrees, but that is the mantra that they're following, and we're reaping the benefits of that. So let's have a quick demo of the navigation APIs. To do that, I'm going to switch back into console mode, into regular standard mode. It's just my preference for this particular demo. So record navigation, this code is all available on GitHub, by the way. So here is me just navigating to the new record page. Now I actually have brought up the standard UI for creating a record, but because I've filled in these particular parameters, I can change what I see in the prompt. So I can maybe default name XXX. And it's put that in there. So I didn't have to use any clever URL hacking things. I just used an API, very simple API. Most of these are just a few lines of code, 4 or 5 lines of code, dead simple to use. I can also bring up the edit action if I wanted to. I can navigate around. I'm not going to click on all of these, but I can navigate to my object home if I wanted to. That allows me to do that. I can also navigate to a particular S-object record, and navigates me to that Bluetooth toothbrush again. And we've also got the file navigation. So I've got a file that I've already uploaded. That's the ID of it. And I can see that it's bringing up the viewer for that. And that's the standard Salesforce view. I didn't code that. It was created for me. So all of these, when you're looking at this UI here, I don't know how many people can sort of see those events at the back there. But those are just the events that you fire in Lightning, and these are the parameters that you pass. So this little console gives you a good way of having a play with different parameters without having to necessarily write the code. Okay, let's talk about the utility bar. It's one of my favorites is the utility bar. So utility bar is a great feature that's kind of a stay resident piece of user interface. Whether you navigate around in different ways, it's always there at the bottom of the page, and you probably spied it in my few demos that I've done so far. And in order to get things on the utility bar, you do implement the available for all page types interface in your component, and then it will ultimately be available to place on the utility bar. There's some great features of the utility bar API, and I'll demonstrate those in a moment, that allow you to use it for all sorts of different purposes, not just sort of a pop-up for some help or a common utility. It actually can get context, and it can communicate dynamically with the user. It's possible to actually track what the user's doing to a certain degree. You can actually implement the regular has-record ID interface, and by tracking the change to the record ID property, you can see when the user navigates from one record to another. And maybe you're kind of looking at what records they navigate across more often than others, or maybe you're showing them some extra information that's contextual to the record they're looking at, that maybe you don't want to clutter the page up with, you just want to put it on the utility bar. Another cool feature of the utility bar is when you configure the utility bar, in the designer, you can put your own attributes. So I have a demo mode attribute that I put on my utility bar component, and it's just a Boolean, but it actually renders as a piece of UI that I can tick when I'm setting up the utility bar. So for those of you that like building components for other people to use, and they're not developers, then you can use this feature, and that you'll get your own config UI inside the utility bar app container when it's being configured. So let's have a look at the utility bar in action. So I'm going to go back to the home page so we're not too distracted by that. So these are my utility bars. I'll just pop a few up here. Kind of, once you first discover the utility bar, you find yourself just sat there, just mindlessly clicking on the things, watching them popping up and down. Well, maybe I do. But so they're pretty cool. I can just move around the UI and nothing changes. They're just sort of hanging around there. I can minimize it if I get bored of it and bring it up there. So let's have a look at the utility bar demo that I created. So first of all, you can get all the utility bar things if you wanted to. You can retrieve via an API a list of all the things at the bottom, you know, what the icon is, the height of it, whether it's visible. You can also manipulate the width of the utility bar. So if I wanted to change the width of this one, I could change that to 300, and it changed the width automatically for me. I'll change it back to 1,000, otherwise the demo is not going to go very well. You can also use some utility methods. This particular method highlights it. You can see how it changed at the bottom there. Got a little red icon and change back again. I can change the label of the utility bar if I wanted to. I can minimize myself, and actually I can do this with any other utility bar because I can get that list of utility bars, so I can, as long as I pass the utility ID in, I can minimize it, so I can minimize myself. This one's quite funky. I ask myself to open myself, and it kind of bounces around a little bit. That's quite cool. This one I'm not 100% sure why you'd want to do this from a UX point of view, but you can switch on something called modal mode, and when you do that, the only thing you can click on is your utility bar, he says. There's actually a bug there, Salesforce. I thought you'd fix that one. So I'm going to refresh my demo. This isn't quite the only thing you can click on, clearly. But that's the modal mode. I think it is designed to allow you to let the user focus on your utility bar. So let's have a little look at some of the demos. Oh, before I go to the demo, I'm going to show you the contextual thing. Let me open up the console mode. And the console mode, I'm going to open up, well, I've got some warranty records, and I've got my Bluetooth toothbrush here. So in this utility bar, I've created an object describe, and as I'm a developer, I kind of just want to know about all the field names that I see on the screen, so I've just dumped that down. And you can see as I'm switching between the different modes, it's actually showing me the, I don't know why it isn't working for Bluetooth toothbrush, actually. Okay, but you can see the actual navigation is changing. It is actually responding, perhaps not in the way I was expecting. There you go. That's an account. Yeah, okay, so that one is working between warranty and account. You can see it switching. And that's that technique I showed on the slides earlier, where you listen to the record ID, property change, and then it'll do stuff. Okay, so let's take a look at some of those utility bar demos. I quite like some of the use cases you can do with the utility bar. So the first one is kind of a progress indicator. So this is emulated, there's nothing going on in the background, but when I click start, it'll minimize itself, and you'll see at the bottom there, hopefully everybody can see that right at the bottom. I'm going to just change my screen a little bit so you can everybody see that changing at the bottom there. And they've even changed the icon just to get a bit more eye candy so the eye is drawn to it, opera being processed. The other thing I can do, in fact I'm going to just stay in that mode for a moment while it's a bit easy for you guys to see, is you can set a notification. So again, I'm just doing a timer in the background, so it's minimized itself, and in a few seconds it'll turn a different color because a notification's arrived. So I can open the utility bar, and again, it's all fictitious, but I can read my notification and that disappears. So pretty cool, huh? I think this Salesforce has done a really good job at allowing us to control that utility bar, and all sorts of wonderful things can be created in it. Okay, let's talk about actions. So users like to click buttons. Where can we put those buttons? What type of buttons are there? So first of all, there's actually record buttons. Those are the ones we're most familiar with. Those exist at the record level, edit, delete, those are the type of ones. You can add your own buttons to those. You can also override the standard buttons as well. Sometimes that standard UI isn't quite enough for your users or your use case. You want something a bit richer. And finally, there's global actions, which are a really cool feature. So custom record actions exist next to all the regular actions, and you can see my widget manager there. And you see there the little lightning icon. That means that's your component. You can put anything you like in that box. It's your box. You put anything that your heart's desire in there. You implement these interfaces, and then Salesforce Lightning will see your component as a possible action to be used. You can also implement the has record ID and has S-object name. This one gives you context. So obviously, it's a button on a record. You're going to want to know what record the user is looking at the time in your code. So that's really important as well. Standard record actions can override the standard UI of Salesforce. So in this case, I've created a wizard. I mean, the widget object is pretty basic, probably a bit overkill to create a wizard, but you get the idea. I just wanted a cleaner way of creating my widget records, so I overrode that, and we'll see a demonstration of that. Little warning note at the bottom there, currently the console mode doesn't honor overrides on standard object actions, which is a bit of a shame, so do make sure if that's really important to you, you might want to provide a separate tab for your wizard experience and not rely on the override. Global actions appear at the top. They're always kind of like the utility bar. They're always resident hanging around at the top on that big blue plus button. And you can use the lightning action, quick action without header interfaces that allow you to display things. The utility bar does allow you to get context, but these don't. For some reason, Salesforce decided that the context isn't that important. Maybe it's a design steer from them to us that we really should be thinking about something that's very cross-object in global actions as opposed to things that are more contextual at the bottom. So let's have a quick look at those features in action. So the first thing that we talked about just then was the standard button. So I've got a standard widget manager button here, and I click it, and I just get my pop-up. Now, many people have asked me if I can actually always have to go to a modal. You can't, unfortunately. Sorry, if I always has to go to a modal dialog, you do. That is the way it's designed at the moment. So hopefully you can fit what you need to do in there, or you can have a button that navigates somewhere else if they need a more advanced view. The other view that we want to talk about is new widget. So when I click new widget, I don't get the standard UI. I get my wizard UI, so I can complete my wizard UI here, and I can hit save, and it takes me back to the record. The final thing was the global actions. So in this case, I've created a widget manager. Again, it's the same sort of component I was just showing earlier, but it pops up a bit like the utility bar and stays resident. Now, the interesting thing compared to this in the utility bar is I can have another one if I wanted to, and it sits up next to the side. Now, just because I'm a bit of a malicious user, I thought, well, Salesforce thought about what happens if I create a third one. What do people think will happen if I create a third one? Will it just like scroll endlessly left and right? Let's see what happens. Look at that, we get this little thing down here, so we can keep going. Let's create another one. And eventually they sort of stack up like tiles. Pretty cool. And I can do that and make them all pop around. I kind of call this like the lightning experience dance, all of these features. They're kind of just popping up all over the place. So I can close some of these down, and the ones that are waiting in the queue pop back up. I can minimize them as well. It's kind of starting to feel a bit Windows-esque, isn't it, really, here? I don't know, it's a bit crazy. So those are the actions. I can also open them up as well. So you can control what you want to put up those. So those are global actions. Pretty cool. Okay. Right, pages and page templates. I'm not going to spend much time on this one. I do want to make sure we've got time for some Q&A, and I've got one more demo on the console API to give. So how many people have used Lightning App Builder? Okay, so you'll recognize this screen. It's the first screen you see. It says, well, you want to create a Lightning page, but what layout do you want? Do you want one column and then 2 rows? And sometimes when you look down that, you think, no, that's not the one I wanted. I want to build a crossword puzzle. So I want lots of boxes. So page layouts let you as a developer define your own boxes and your own layout for other people to use. So think of it as just a layout container that you can define with another component. So the component doesn't do anything other than lay out the lines, the grid that you want to do. And you can create your own graphics and your own name that appear in Lightning App Builder. So if you were so inclined, you could build yourself a little cottage industry of amazing layouts for App Builder if you wanted to. So console navigation. The console mode you saw me demonstrate earlier has quite a lot of flexibility, and to go with it, Salesforce have created a really cool API that allows you to listen to what's going on in console mode. It's a lot more contextual than the actual standard utility bar demo that I showed you. You can figure out what's going on pretty much exclusively when the user's navigating. So I can find out what tabs they've got open, I can find out when they're navigating, I can create new tabs, so I can create usability tools. I'll show some examples of that. And I can close the tabs if I wanted to. So let's go to widget console mode. Okay, and as before, we've got quite a few tabs open, but I didn't want those tabs. That was yesterday's firefight. Today I've got a completely different firefight with lots of different records. So I want to easily close these. So I've used the global action to host my demo. And in this global action, it pops up and shows me all of the tabs that are open. If you watch carefully in the focus column, you can see as I'm changing, the value of true changes to denote which tab's open. And as I'm actually closing tabs and opening tabs, you can see the list is dynamically growing as I'm doing that. So quite a lot of flexibility as a developer to listen to what's going on. So some of the demos that I created is the close all tabs. I think it's really strange that we seem to get these multi-tab situations, and it takes a few releases to get the close all one. Maybe it's kind of just low on the list of priorities because you want to have many tabs. But anyway, I decided to create a close all tab. So I click that, and it calls the API, and it closes all my tabs. It's not particularly rocket science, but it's a good example of what you can do. Now, here's an interesting one. There exists a flag on the account object that determines whether it's a hot account, I think. I'm not sure the exact flag now, but it's an account that you should really be paying a lot of attention to. So I figured, well, I get in the morning, I want to immediately just look at all of those. I don't want to go to my list view. Maybe I actually don't have my list view open here. I'm looking at widgets as it happens, and I don't want to navigate through. So I can click this button, and it does a query in the back end for all of my hot accounts, my top 5 ones, and then just opens them for me on the screen. So a little bit of UI automation as I actually use the actual console mode API. For speed, Salesforce does tend to defer the loading of these, so the network's not particularly fast here, but it is probably by the time I've finished talking, still loading those. Yeah, it's not going to play ball, is it? But it does load the accounts. So, yeah, and we can see all those tabs have now been opened as well. Good, okay, so that was the console navigation API. By the way, the utility bar and console APIs are JavaScript APIs. You're not writing Apex here. They're JavaScript APIs. So you put a component inside your component, and Salesforce exposes that API to you. So you want to know a little bit more about Lightning component development, then the Lightning developer guide. It is a bit of a dry read, but really I found that context thing deep inside that documentation. It's not that well documented. So there's sometimes little gems that you find in there by reading through that stuff. The console mode has its own dedicated developer guide as well, so that's quite a neat way of calling that out separately. My personal blog is Andy in the Cloud. All of the code that you've just seen, we demonstrate all those sample bits of code are available in GitHub. I didn't have a lot of time to get through this content and show you all the code, so a bit of apologies for not so much code there, but you will be able to see all of that in its glory in the GitHub account. There are some trailheads linked with this session, so you can check those out. You don't need to find those. If you go to this session in your Dreamforce app, you'll find those trailhead accounts listed there. Finally, I do have a book. If anybody's interested in the broader spectrum of my thoughts and experience in developing enterprise applications on the platform for the last sort of 9 years, then you can check out my book. It should be available in the bookstores in the event. And it's all about sort of bringing a product to market on the App Exchange and packaging it up, performance, Lightning, testing, everything's covered in it. So thanks very much for listening, everyone. I'll take some questions. Question at the back there. I don't know, probably easier if you come up to the mic. Oh, you can shout. I'll repeat the question. Go ahead.
Is there any difference between developing a component for the app versus the console?
Yeah, so the question is there any difference between developing a Lightning component for the standard navigation and the console? No, there isn't. You should always test in all the contexts, Bolt, mobile. If you truly want to make your component agnostic of all the containers, do the testing. There are some subtleties, but as far as those two modes, there are no differences that I've detected. Okay, no more questions. Thanks very much. Cheers. Oh, there's some here. Thanks. Yeah, so the question is, do I know of any functionality that means that you can fire an event from a trigger that a component can react to? Well, that does exist today. So in Process Builder, you could fire a platform event, and then in the component, one of the components in my demo was a component for listening to platform events. So you use Process Builder to fire the event whenever the logic dictates that you need it to, and then there's a component called the streamer component in my code that can listen to that and do whatever you need it to do. Yes, from Apex. You can do it from Apex, from Process Builder, there's loads of APIs. Actually, the streamer component is from my other session that's later this week. Any more questions? Excellent. Okay, thanks everyone. Cheers.